Hello, my friends. This is Outside the Bubble, episode 33. I'm your host, Joanna Bull, and today we are talking about psychological safety. So a group at Google set out to discover what makes a Google team effective. Over the course of 2 years, they performed a detailed, rigorous analysis that included over 200 interviews with employees and looked at more than 250 attributes. The group had already decided that the results would reflect a mix of individual traits and skills that are necessary for an effective team. And they were pretty confident that they'd find the mix that was perfect of individual traits and skills necessary in order to make an effective team. But after 2 years, the findings were very different than expected. The individual traits and skills didn't actually matter. What actually mattered is how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. One key dynamic that sets Google teams up for success that teachers need to pay attention to is psychological safety. Can students take risks in the classroom without feeling insecure or embarrassed? As a teacher, we want to say yes. I definitely, absolutely want to say yes, that students in my class were absolutely able to take risks without feeling insecure or embarrassed. But I'm not 100% sure that I can say that with confidence. I'm not sure I did everything possible in order to set up that type of atmosphere. It's not actually enough to simply say yes as a teacher, to think that we've set the environment for students to take risks. We actually need to make sure that we're explicitly setting up the classroom and explicitly teaching both external and internal components of psychological safety for our students. It might be easy for a lot of our students to take risks around a group of friends or trusted adults, but it also might not be easy. Taking a risk around classmates and teachers seems simple, but I want you to think about the last time you were involved with something. Did you feel like you could ask what the outcome or the objective was supposed to be without the risk of sounding like you're the only one that's out of the loop? Or did you opt in that moment for continuing without clarifying anything in order to avoid being perceived as someone that's unaware? We often say things like, ask questions. No question is a stupid question. But how do people actually react when questions are asked and we think you should already know the answer? It's human nature to be reluctant to engage in behaviors that could negatively influence how others perceive our competence, awareness, and positivity. Google found that individuals with a higher psychological safety are less likely to leave Google, and they're more likely to harness the power of diverse ideas from their teammates. Being able to harness the power of diverse ideas is essential to innovation, and it's essential to our students. Organizational behavioral scientist Amy Edmondson of Harvard defines psychological safety as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. To measure the level of psychological safety, she asked team members at Google how strongly they agreed or disagreed with these statements. If you make a mistake on this team, is it often held against you? Members of this team are able to bring up problems and tough issues. People on this team sometimes reject others for being different. It is safe to take a risk on this team. It is difficult to ask other members of this team for help. No one on this team would deliberately act in a way that undermines my efforts. Working with members of this team, my unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. So consider using these ideas and these questions and putting them into student-friendly language and having students respond privately about how they feel in the class and or how they feel when they're assigned and doing group work. Edmondson offers 3 simple things individuals can do to foster team psychological safety. So number 1, frame the work as a learning problem, not an execution problem. Number 2, acknowledge your own fallibility. Number 3, model curiosity and ask lots of questions. And it's definitely important to monitor and reflect upon the impact of our work and how we're creating an environment for our students. This can be done through the following debriefing questions. So ask, what behaviors do I see that reflect psychological safety within my classroom? What behaviors may signal that psychological safety is lacking in my classroom or in a particular scenario? Why is psychological safety so important? What difference does it make in a classroom? And then asking the students what they have seen in their classes in terms of psychological safety and behaviors. And consider co-creating psychological safety look-fors using the following headers. What does it look like to demonstrate engagement? What does it look like to show understanding? What does it look like to be inclusive in interpersonal settings? What does it look like to be inclusive in decision-making? And what does it look like to show confidence and conviction? Fundamentally, experiencing psychological safety in the classroom means that students feel comfortable being vulnerable in front of the people they see every day. And vulnerability for most people is absolutely terrifying. Vulnerability in class can take many different forms, including speaking up to propose a risky or untested idea, admitting publicly that the project or assignment wasn't successful, and offering lessons learned in the process, disagreeing with classmates and teachers, or offering a different way forward than previously considered, being willing to give up time or resources to help out a classmate, sticking up for a classmate in the face of adversity, volunteering to do something you have no idea how to do, and showing emotions when you're under pressure or stressed out. And as teachers, we can create a space that supports psychological safety, but we also need to explicitly teach strategies to help students develop their own psychological safety, so that even when they're faced with a difficult environment or a difficult situation, they know that they have the skills. In order to do this, we have to teach kids how to change their dialogue about failure. This can include their external dialogue, but also their internal dialogue. When we start thinking a certain way and we think thoughts that start with what if or I can't, we actually create a physical response within the body. Responses like anxiety and racing thoughts, and that can lead to something like sweaty palms. And the more you think these thoughts, the worse it gets, and pretty soon you've worked yourself into a state of not being able to move forward, which feels unsafe, kind of like you're going to die. I've had lots of students that definitely feel like they're going to die when they have to give a presentation in front of the class. And in order to work through it, we have to teach kids how to manage these thoughts, and it's vital to resiliency. So thoughts I like to use instead are, this could be fun. If this were easy, how would I do it? I'm willing to learn. Everybody fails. This is only the beginning. I spent 13 years in the classroom before leaving to become a consultant. I did not have a single student not give a presentation, regardless of how fearful they were, because we would use these strategies without me really realizing what I was doing. I really wanted them to be successful presenters and to feel like they had the skills to present. In grade 4, I was giving a speech on cereal, and I was so terrified that I actually passed out and I hit my head on the chalkboard. I woke up pretty quickly, but I remember that feeling of like everyone staring at me because of how nervous I was. And I never wanted that for my students. So every student would always present, and I would ask them, what do you need to make this happen? Sometimes they needed a friend to sit with them. Sometimes they needed somebody to control the actual computer so that they weren't pressing the keys. Sometimes they needed notes. I even had students sit and hold hands. And it was always just about making sure that they had that safety net. But how else could I have done that in my classroom? It's worth digging into this Google research even more and for learning more about psychological safety. So just remember, the individual traits and skills don't actually matter. What actually matters is how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. Consider bringing these aspects of psychological safety into your classroom explicitly, and also consider sharing the Google findings with staff in your building as well as administration. Consider stepping up and doing a psychological safety activity with your staff. It's definitely important that we all feel like our contributions matter. I'd love to hear what you do You can reach out to me on Twitter at IdeaSmashing or on Instagram at Outside the Bubble Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.